Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for the third community conversation with County Executive Matt Meyer, where we plan to talk about county issues that matter to you. I'm Amy Cherry with WDEL, and I'll be your host tonight. Tonight's conversation is airing live on 101.7 FM and 1150 AM WDEL, as well as on WDEL.com. It's also being streamed on the County Executive's Facebook page, Instagram page, and YouTube channel. We'll be monitoring the comment section of both the county page and the Facebook page to get some of your questions throughout this discussion. Now we're coming to you live here from the Claymont Library, which we're really excited about because it reopened earlier this week along with other county libraries. And tonight we're here in Claymont and we're in County Councilman John Cartier's district. So he's here with us tonight to say a few opening words. John?
Thank you, Amy. I'm very pleased to be here tonight with our outstanding County Executive Matt Meyer and yourself in this beautiful Claymont Public Library, which is newly reopened. And I want to urge the public, we know you've been away. We know you're anxious to return. Come on back. Please wear a mask. There'll be some social distancing, but you can come indoors and enjoy this great public library once again.
Thanks so much, John. And I know County Executive Matt Meyer has a few opening remarks before we get into the Q&A here. So Matt, take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy. It's wonderful to be here at the Claymont Library with Councilman Cartier, who had a lot to do with the Claymont Library being created on this site. Special thanks to County Executive Paul Clark, former County Executive Paul Clark. If you're out there who was living, breathing, sleeping Claymont Library for years of his life, as well as Dave Culver, former head of land use for the county, and Diana Brown, who still runs our library. It's a beautiful facility as of today. It is reopened, as are all of our 15 Newcastle County libraries. Check the schedule. The schedule's a little bit different. The rules are a little bit different. We're doing it with safety as our first, second, and third concern. We opened on Monday, libraries across the county. We're looking to hear from you. If you have any feedback, if you had a great experience going into our libraries, we want to hear it. If you had something, if you saw something that you felt wasn't safe or wasn't right, I want to know that as well. So thank you, Amy, for hosting us tonight. We really appreciate this opportunity to engage with the public. It's really the most important thing that I do. There are 565,000 plus or minus residents of Newcastle County. We'll find out shortly once the census comes out exactly how many. And you are my boss. If you live in the district here in Claymont, you are John Cartier's boss, and we're here for you, and we're eager to hear from you tonight.
Okay, thanks so much, Matt. And I want to jump right in and start talking about the $108 million in American Rescue Plan funds that the county is slated to receive. You've said that you want public input on how this money has been spent. You called for public input. What have you heard so far?
So we, as you know, last year were one of 177 jurisdictions, counties and municipalities across the country who applied for and received CARES Act money. Here in Newcastle County, we received $322.7 million. Recently, just a few weeks ago, the National Association of Counties and National Academy of Public Administration recognized our great work disseminating those funds. They recognized, I think, 4 or 5 counties from across the country for doing outstanding work, thanks to the partnership of Councilman Cartier, Councilman Tackett, who I know is listening in tonight, and the rest of County Council. We put together a great plan and did some really exciting things to protect our community against the virus, to protect the most vulnerable with incredible things like the new Hope Center, and also to start to build back better, to plant the seeds with small business, with restaurants for the jobs of tomorrow. We're going to run a similar process. You can go right now to newcastlede.gov/reimagine, newcastlede.gov/reimagine, and tell us what you want us to do with your taxpayer dollars. We announced the site 48 hours ago, and since then I believe we've received over 80 individuals and groups have come forward with information, ideas, things about education we need to be doing better, things about addressing needs of disabled populations and otherly abled population that have been uniquely negatively impacted during this time. So we're looking forward to input.
So I can appreciate that you want the public's input here, but I want to talk about areas where you may envision this money being spent. If this money were to be spent sort of with a strategic vision in mind, focusing on maybe what some of the county's largest issues are, what would you say those
So with the
be?
CARES Act last year, it was a public health emergency, and we were looking to immediately deploy funds to address that public health emergency, to make sure that testing was widespread, to make sure that contact tracing was really high quality, to work with the state to shore up our unemployment insurance fund, to work with the state to make sure small businesses were taken care of so that small businesses didn't go under. Now we're in a little different situation. I was at a groundbreaking today where Shekubaya, a local attorney, said, we went through dark times and now we're in very dim times. So it's not dark, the lights aren't out, it's getting a little bit brighter, the weather's beautiful outside, we're getting there. And so we're planning to use this stimulus to address longer term issues. Really focus on two things. Job creation, right? Our unemployment rate still remains among the highest it's been in decades. And the other is addressing historic injustices. There are injustices in policing, there's injustices in schooling, education, in our communities that have existed for generations. Had we spoken, Amy, 2-3 years ago, before this pandemic, we could have spoken openly about these injustices in our community. So many of them were exacerbated over the past year. So many things have been brought right in front of our eyes. Basic issues of health inequity, where some people in some neighborhoods get amazing treatment for diabetes and have great outcomes, and other people in other areas don't. And during a pandemic, that in many instances was the difference between life and death. We need to use these resources to address those longstanding injustices and to bring jobs back to our county.
And from what I'm hearing too, you've got a lot more flexibility in how this money can be spent.
That's right. The regulations aren't out yet, but for something like revenue replacement, so for example, you might recall 3 years ago, we enacted a hotel tax for the county with Councilman Cartier's strong support. That hotel tax over the past year has not generated much income for the county, much needed income to pay for policing, paramedic, 911, these beautiful libraries and parks. And so with the CARES Act funds, we were not able to replenish our funds with the missing hotel tax funds. With these new stimulus funds, we'll be able to do something like that. Just one small example. One other point, if I can make it, regarding this new stimulus that's different than CARES Act. As I mentioned, we were one of 177 local jurisdictions around this country that received CARES Act funding. We were the only local government in Delaware to receive CARES Act funding. The city of Wilmington, right here, the city of Bellefonte, Kent County, Sussex County, did not receive any CARES Act funding. With the American Rescue Plan, every local government in the country is receiving a proportionate amount of stimulus money. So it's absolutely incumbent on all of us. We had a meeting last week with the municipal leaders to partner, to make sure that, hey, if Wilmington's got a great idea, let's do it in Newark and Middletown, let's do it in Ellesmere and Newcastle and across our county.
Mm-hmm. And that will free up dollars then to be spent exclusively on those unincorporated sections of the county then versus, say, Wilmington or Newark or whoever.
That's right.
Okay. And so with the CARES Act money, you kind of talked about this a little bit. You bought a hotel at auction and turned it into a pandemic homeless shelter, an effort that so far has been successful. And I doubt you're going to buy another hotel, but I'm wondering if perhaps you see or envision this money being spent on putting some of the people who may be at the hotel now into permanent housing.
Well, our expenditure with CARES Act started with the problem. What's the problem? The problem was there were individuals and families experiencing homelessness who were in danger in a pandemic, who would, as it was getting cold, if they went into a shelter, it wasn't safe to sleep many beds in a shelter. It was a problem. The hotel was one of a range of solutions to address that problem. Similarly, what we're doing now is we're trying to identify the problems. One problem, very clearly, if you go and talk to our Hope Center staff, if you talk to the residents of the Hope Center, if you talk to many working residents across our county, there's a big problem with affordable housing, a big problem. So as I like to say, our first issue with the Hope Center was to provide a safe place for people to sleep. Our second issue was to provide wraparound services. So if people were facing domestic abuse, if they were facing mental health issues, substance use issues, employment issues, educational academic issues for their kids, physical health issues, whatever it was, we were able to provide the services. We're doing much of that now. The next step is saying, okay, how can we move you out into stable housing? One big problem with that is a big shortage of supply in affordable housing. As prices increase in the housing market, it gets harder and harder. So that's something we're looking at. I know Councilman Cartier and a lot of county council people, Councilman Hollins, has spoken to me about it, about things we can do to address that. So that's a problem we're going to be looking at solving.
And while we're talking about American Rescue Plan money, I want to point out a couple of the comments here. Laureen on Facebook says, yay, the Claymont Library is open, best library ever. And somebody asked, what about recreation and parks and whether you envision money being spent there?
So we, in addition to the American Rescue Plan, we announced our county budget about 3.5 weeks ago. And in that budget, we announced the greatest increase in budgeting for open space, parks, and farmland preservation in county history. I think we nearly doubled the amount of money for open space and preservation. One thing that we've seen in the last year is how important our parks, open spaces, pathways are. A friend of mine likes to say it's his new office. Everybody's talking about home as the new office. Our parks can be your new office. And so how do we make sure that those parks and open space are spread equally and equitably across our county? It's certainly something of concern, and making sure that we plan properly for that. With that, a note, you can go to ncc2050.newcastlede.gov, ncc2050.newcastlede.gov. If you believe there needs to be more open space preservation, more parkland, more paths, make sure your voice is heard through our long-term comprehensive planning process. It's going on right now. It's going to result in a plan being written and presented to the state next year.
Thanks so much for that question, Estefania. And I'm going to skip around a little bit here because we're talking about parks, and so I want to talk about the budget. Some on council have said that there's not enough money in your proposed budget for public works and parks maintenance, indicating they could be pushing for more spending in those areas. Is that something you're willing to see? Sure.
We need to take care of our parks. We need to take care of our parks and public works personnel. And we did create a new position within our parks division in the budget. I proposed a $311 million budget. It's a 2.68% increase from the prior year. It does not include a tax increase, and we're particularly sensitive to that now. We know that there are many across our community, more than normal, who are really struggling financially. And so we're making sure that whatever new investments we make, they're within reason, and they're things that we can afford without putting any additional burden on taxpayers.
One investment that you did make in your budget is on humans who work for county government. You're proposing that everyone in county government make $15 an hour. And a similar move, as many probably know, is underway on the state level, but more gradually, to get to $15 an hour by, I think it's 2024, if my memory serves correctly. I'm wondering how many county workers now make less than $15 an hour, and what a bump like that may cost.
Well, right now, 0, because it's already into effect.
Okay.
But the question is, how many 6 months ago? How many? So it applies to permanent full-time workers.
Okay.
And I don't know. I don't think it was more than 20 out of 2,000 employees, so it wasn't many. It's really important to me that if you're serving in the public interest, anybody should be making a livable wage in 2021. It's particularly important to me as I've gone around the county and seen what county employees have done, including right here in this library. Librarians working around the clock, both to come up with like creative online story time, sometimes from their homes, so that library services could continue. Obviously, police, paramedics, going into people's houses, a year ago when they think that simply breathing the virus could kill them within days, and yet they still go in service to the public interest. We're going to do everything we can to continue to provide for them and their families.
Don't part-time workers deserve the $15 an hour too?
I think it depends. So, for example, our summer youth employment, when we looked at it, we said our summer youth employment, we're launching our largest summer youth employment program ever. Vitally important, especially this year, that young adults, or children, somebody 14 to 20, I believe are the ages, have creative, engaging things to do. If we were, I think they're all paid less than $15 an hour, something in the neighborhood of $10 an hour. I believe it's a wage set by the State Department of Labor. If we increase that in the county to $15 an hour, we'd have to dramatically decrease the number of people involved in the program. I I'm not completely convinced that a high school worker working part-time in the summer to get job experience necessarily needs $15 an hour. I think that, a 20, 30-year-old, somebody who's trying to feed their family, is working full-time in the public interest, certainly deserves at least $15 an hour.
I want to talk about a new sewer fee that you're implementing or proposing rather in this budget. Tell us about it and what it will pay for.
So almost any utility across the country, whether it's your water utility, Artesian, Suez, or in the water in the city of Wilmington, power across the country, there's a basic, what they call a hookup fee, that you pay not just when you hook up, but you pay monthly or quarterly or annually just for providing service. So if you don't even turn on your lights, right, Delmarva Power is still, or Exelon, they're still going to charge you, right, just for having the opportunity to have power. The power supply is to your house. A study was done. They came to me a couple months ago and said we need to charge for basic residences $100 a year just for the hookup fee. I didn't think adding a fee onto people's sewer bills in the middle of a pandemic made much sense. So we reduced it to what we thought was a manageable number, $25. If you're having trouble paying your sewer, if you think that $25 is too much for you, we want to know. The point is not to put any extraordinary financial stress on any of our sewer customers, is to make sure that we can sustain our sewers for the long term. I should add that along with that, there is no increase in sewer rates, and we don't see any sewer rate increase coming in the near future. I know Councilman Cartier, that might not make him too happy. There's no one. He's kind of the dean of county sewers. I don't know if there's a county resident who's ever looked out for our sewer system as much as Councilman Cartier has.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago he had pushed for an increase there. So.
Yeah. So.
Okay. We're more than a year into this COVID-19 pandemic, and I want to know what one thing you wished you had known about COVID-19 that may have impacted your decisions. What did you wish you knew a year ago?
I wish I knew the power of messenger RNA. I would have developed the vaccine a long time ago. And I'm joking, but I was reading, I don't know if anyone read about Carlin, I think her name is. It's the most extraordinary story. This is the daughter of a Hungarian butcher who came to the U.S. at a young age. She's a biochemist who was at the University of Pennsylvania. And for decades, her one focus of research has been messenger RNA, that she believes messenger RNA, which carries everyone's DNA code, messenger RNA in all of us, is able to basically produce its own vaccines by reading DNA code. And she's been researching it. Not many people believed her, so she had all this trouble getting grants. She's never made more than $60,000 a year, and her research has been absolutely critical to developing the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine. So I wish I was a messenger RNA expert. I think I can tell you one thing that I've been overwhelmed by is the number of people that have come forward. A lot of my job as county executive is going and talking to communities and individuals and families telling me what they need. During the pandemic, I saw a little bit of a change where so many people came forward and asked me how they could help. The Hope Center, which was a really difficult decision to invest a sizable amount of public funds to purchase a hotel, nothing like it has ever been done in state history. Very few examples around the country. One thing we didn't think about was that hundreds, really thousands of individuals, groups that have come forward just saying, how can we help? We want to contribute. We want to make sure that our neighbors are taken care of. We want to make sure that everyone's vaccinated. We want to put on a mask to make sure everybody's safe. And it's really been inspiring for me, as someone who's really just trying to do good and seeing so many people out there leading the way.
Mm-hmm. That's a really nice sentiment. And when I visited the Hope Center, they said the same thing. There were so many people there. They had entire rooms full of donated supplies of all kinds of things. And I think at the time Carrie was like, yeah, we don't accept clothes, but we're going to make sure these clothes go to a great place.
Yeah. Carrie Casey and Nicole Waters, who've done heroic work along with Kim Eppeheimer of Friendship House and Danielle Hennessy, who's the hotel manager. They very early on, they realized there was a need for physical health, medical health. My instruction to Carrie and Nicole is just, as soon as we purchase this, let's get it open as soon as possible. There are people sleeping out in the cold. Let's just get it open. We can worry about a lot of the details later. Make sure it's safe, and let's get it opened. Very quickly, we found the need for medical, some sort of medical health service. And Dr. Gibney reached out and she said all that she needed was a massage table. And Carrie hung up the phone. She said, that's great. She said, there's one problem. I don't have a massage table. So it occurred to her to just post on Facebook, hey, I need a massage table. You know that within an hour she had 3 massage tables. And that's kind of been our experience where, yes, as a government, we're trying to pool resources together, make sure we're providing everything. But where there are gaps, it's just inspiring how many people have come forward.
You know, and I think people often complain that government too bureaucratic, too dragging their feet, whatever. This is an example of something that moved very quickly.
Yeah, you have to in a pandemic.
You've been a proponent of testing and helped create the access that Delawareans have to COVID-19 tests here in Newcastle County. Going forward, do you envision free testing as something that will be ongoing for the foreseeable future until we can say we're out of this?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think if there are products in the market that are readily available, and as long as all citizens can go buy them and they're not prohibitively expensive, then we'll probably start scaling down our test sites. I think it's very important, as you know, I was passionate about March 27th of last year. I wrote an op-ed about how important testing was. There was no way we're going to get out of this virus as long as it's invisible in our communities, and human testing, and as we've later learned, sewer testing have made that more visible. So we're not going to just shut off the test sites. A lot of research is showing now that it's really important that testing continues at high volumes. That's the way we know whether there's high prevalence or not in certain areas around our community and around the country. Mm-hmm. So we're going to keep it open as long as there's a need for it to be provided.
And it could be a good indicator as well as to how well vaccines may be working, as we're starting to see some breakthrough cases. The variants are still sort of circulating, and we don't know how those impact the vaccines.
That's right.
Either.
The only caveat I'll put on that is that there's a lot of evidence that shows that if you have the vaccine, mm-hmm. and if there is a breakthrough case and you do test positive, even after the first dose of either the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, there's a lot of evidence that shows the symptoms will be much more mild.
Absolutely, definitely. It prevents death and severe hospitalizations in most cases.
That's right. Bottom line is get vaccinated.
You got yours.
I got my first one.
Okay, you got your first. How'd you feel?
I felt fine. I was joking after that I felt fine, and I actually woke up the next morning, I'm like, that actually hurts more than most shots I'm used to, but within 24 hours, it was fine. I have nothing to complain about. I know some people have had some rough experiences. Rough experience, they're saying, means that your immune system is working, but compared to the stories I've heard, and we've all heard about COVID-19, it's certainly well worth it.
How did you feel emotionally, if you will, in terms of this being that first step for you to get back to normal?
You know, it's interesting because I waited my turn. I waited till the window was open for my age group. And I obviously, so a lot of people, my parents and all of my parents' friends and network got vaccinated beforehand. And I didn't think it would impact me that much, but it really does. I don't know what your experience has been, Amy, but in my mind, it certainly, there's this sense of freedom. I don't want to say invincibility, but I feel like I can, go out to lunch. I sit outside. I take all the precautions, but I feel a little bit more comfortable. That's the first thing. The second thing is, this is really a scientific miracle. I didn't think science could do this that fast. I didn't think federal government regulatory systems could get through a vaccine this quickly. So it's really impressive when you think that where we were as a society, hundreds of years ago, we didn't even have power, we didn't have sanitary sewers, we didn't have basic things, and now we're developing these advanced vaccines in months.
Mm-hmm. And when we talk about the vaccine, hesitancy has been an issue nationwide, and to some degree, particularly in frontline workers, first responders, police, fire, paramedics. What is the vaccination rate for county police officers and paramedics, if you're aware of it?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure exactly what the vaccination rate is. We'll see if we can get that posted. As you know, police, paramedic, fire, those, along with healthcare workers on the front lines, were 1A. They were the first to be vaccinated, or to have an opportunity to be vaccinated back in December. I know it's a sizable percentage. I also know that not everybody opted to take the vaccine.
I wonder too if, perhaps maybe they didn't get it in 1A, but now that we've progressed further, a few more weeks have gone by, they're seeing how people react, if you may see sort of another surge of interest.
Yeah, they're saying that the number one thing to reduce vaccine hesitancy isn't necessarily those videos, which often convinced me, a lot of good videos, but it's your friends and family getting vaccinated and being absolutely fine.
100%. I had family members who were iffy about it too. I said, I got mine and I'm still here. I feel
right.
fine. And, they started signing up saying, how can you get me an appointment to do it?
Yeah.
So you can quickly kind of see the tone change.
Yeah, that's right.
Where do your efforts stand to provide those 1A workers, the frontline emergency workers, with the hazard pay that had been talked about?
So the first thing I did with CARES Act a year ago is we got assistance to municipalities and fire service, which, as I said earlier, they didn't get CARES Act funding directly, so we made sure we provided them funding. By the way, at the governor's instruction, the first thing he said to me is take care of the municipalities with your money, and so we did that. And in that announcement, I also said we were proposing hazard pay for all first responders in county or municipal government. County council at the time balked, didn't want us to do it. They later, Council President Hartley Nagel proposed hazard pay. It really wasn't sufficiently specific, so we weren't sure how to implement it, and the amount of money would be so small we didn't think it was material. We're still working on it. The American Rescue Plan Act explicitly permits some sort of bonus for workers. There's a cap on the amount. I think it's $15,000 per worker and some amount per hour. We're still looking at it, and it's something I want to get done. It's really important to me that in a crisis you say to your workers on the front lines, not just in government, but in any sector, that if we're telling everyone, go home, it's not safe, there's this deadly virus out there, and you're getting up and going to work every morning to keep us safe, you deserve a little extra. You need to know that we got your backs.
Mm-hmm. We've got a question here on the Facebook page from Seth. He wants to know how much was actually invested into the Hope Center. I'm guessing he means beyond the $19.5 million to buy it.
Yeah, the purchase was $19.5 million. It's taken another, so we have the total amount budgeted to date is about $25 million. We have not expended all of that. There's also revenue that comes in through a federal program. We get approximately $50 a night per, I believe it's per bed. It's either per bed or per room, which is one reason why people can't just show up. Because it's not a hotel, we don't advertise for people to come. You have to go through the continuum of care, an official system, to be placed there. So there's a revenue attached to it, and our numbers look pretty good in terms of our ability to sustain this thing for the foreseeable future. We had a meeting the other day, a budget meeting with the Hope Center. We certainly have resources to sustain the Hope Center through 2024, and we have several plans to sustain it beyond that.
And that was before you had the American Rescue Plan money, too.
That's right.
So that could possibly come into play here?
That's right.
Okay. Shifting gears, I want to talk about accountability in policing. You were recently applauded for releasing the body camera footage in the Lyndon Moses fatal shooting against the advice of your own chief. The police union wasn't happy about it, and I want to know why you thought it was important to release that footage before the investigation.
I think we have a crisis of public trust potentially in local government generally across our country, maybe in government generally, but we certainly have a crisis of public trust with respect to policing. That doesn't necessarily mean that police are doing bad things. What it means is there is a disconnect between police and communities, certain communities of color, for example. It's not a new problem, right? When you talk to older African Americans about their view of police through their lifetime, this crisis of public trust is a problem that's existed in some communities for longer than you or I have been alive, and to some extent for longer than this country has existed. There are a number of ways to start to address a crisis of public trust. The first is absolute transparency. We need to show you what's going on. If you're paying taxes into the pot to help fund our police, we need to be open and honest about what is going on. Certainly when there are controversial incidents, we need to, insofar as the law allows, we need to be open and transparent about that. I should add there are limitations. Had the Moses family or had a victim in that instance come to me and said they don't want the video released, we may not have released the video. Our county attorney is working now on some policies so that going forward, we'll be able to determine what the best treatment is for release of this video and all sorts of information involving any police incident.
Attorneys for the Moses family said that that footage was redacted and that some audio was missing. They're also calling for officers involved to be identified and charged. Do you plan on taking any more steps at this point before the DOJ report?
So first of all, any charge that the video has been redacted, I looked at the video that was shown to me privately, the video that was shown to the family privately, and the video that was shown to the public, and there are no substantive differences. One of the main accusation is around the initial audio being silent. The body cams that we have, when they automatically turn on, I believe it's the first 30 or 60 seconds, the audio does not kick on. It's just the technology that we have. In terms of the names, you asked, the names of the officers, there's a demand out there. You know, things involving officer discipline and officer conduct are sharply regulated by the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights at the state. I know there's a very open discussion about amending that law enforcement or like Maryland just did, removing it. And I'm an advocate for making serious changes, if not removing our Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights, but we're not going to break the law.
Yeah, you've publicly said as much that you're an advocate of that on WDEL in the past, and I'm wondering if you believe that those changes and those discussions that are underway that people are advocating for, whether they'll actually happen.
I don't know. I can tell you from my perspective as a citizen, I don't think they're going fast enough. I think it's something our police see every day, is this crisis of public trust, not across our whole county, but in certain communities. And one way to reassure the public, I think, is really taking a hard look at our Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights, starting to make changes.
And earlier this week, there's a story about it on WDEL.com. County Councilman Jay Street has resigned, quit, stepped down, however you want to call it, from his co-chair position because he said he does, on the Public Safety Committee, I should say, because he doesn't have confidence in the police. He doesn't have confidence in the administration that anything is going to change. And he's been dealing with use of excessive force issues, if you will, since 1979.
So,
yeah, what steps can be taken right now to increase transparency and find more accountability in policing that don't have to wait for Dover?
So the hard part is they don't have to wait for Dover, because in the first place, so when you talk about police trust and accountability, the overwhelming majority of residents don't distinguish too much between city police and county police and state police. They want policing to be good. If a city police officer in any municipalities, Newark, Middletown, Ellesmere, Newcastle, Wilmington, if they do something, that bears on the public trust of county and state police officers. Quite frankly, if someone in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, does something really bad on camera, that bears on the public trust and accountability here in Newcastle County. We're going to do everything we can to be transparent. We're looking constantly at how to improve our community policing. We have to understand this is not just a policing problem. We need to look broadly. We more than doubled in this budget that I announced 3.5 weeks ago, and we're proposing to County Council. We more than doubled the budget of our community intervention teams, which go into communities. They work with teens just to make sure they have constructive things to do. I know as a former teacher, you can't go to young people and constantly, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. Parents know that, right? They hear don't all the time. They're gonna either do the exact opposite of what the adults are saying, or they're gonna find something else to do. It's smarter to say, hey, why don't we play chess? Here's a bicycle, here's a basketball court, here's engaging robotics course, here's computer programming, things you can do. So we're trying to invest in that way as well to build community trust.
On the flip side of that, how have you been able to gauge how all of this discussion, all of this need for change has affected police morale?
So we don't have many gauges of police morale. Obviously, a lot of what I hear is that the way to address police morale is to pay more money. I can tell you that police officers are not departing our department at any different rate that they have in the past. and our recruitment is still healthy in spite of everything that's going on. Now, that may change. I'm hearing from agency leaders, from police agency leaders from across the country that that's changing. So we need to be cognizant of that. We got to make sure so many of our police officers out there are truly heroes, Amy. Just yesterday morning, I was at our annual Public Safety Awards, and these stories of what our police officers do, I know you know, I know many people out there know, these are heroes. Officer New and Officer Nicholson, a few weeks before Christmas, in December, in a pandemic, they were called out to a couple kids panhandling in a parking lot of an apartment complex. And they went out there and they talked to the kids, you know, what are you doing? And they said they were just panhandling because their mom didn't have enough money to pay for basic needs. So Officer New and Nicholson, what they're supposed to do is write up a report. If law was violated, there's supposed to be charges filed against the kid or against the kids or the mother. Instead, they got the mother's phone number, they called the mother, and they kind of found out what she needed. And they went out and with their fellow officers, they did a fundraising. And they raised all these resources for that family to have a beautiful Christmas. Officer New still keeps in touch with those officers. It's one story that we heard about, so it got an award. There are so many other stories like that, as you know, of officers in Newcastle, I like to think especially in Newcastle County Police, but also in the municipal departments, in the state police, who are doing that, who are going above and beyond in service to the community. Unfortunately, a lot of the worst incidents obviously make the front pages, but I've had an opportunity to see in my position these inspiring things that happen every single day.
Mm-hmm. Shifting gears, final topic of the evening for me at least is property reassessment. A bunch of people have been asking me to ask you about this. There's a lot of unknowns. The general public, all they think right away is that it's going to cost me more to live in my house. So can you clarify this process for us and what it's going to happen, what that restructuring will look like to your knowledge?
Okay, a few things. Number one, we were sued and we're under court order, so we have to do it, right? Kent County, Sussex County, we're all doing it. The second thing is your tax bill, your property assessment on your tax bill will not change between now and 2023. So for the next 2 years, you're not going to see any change in your assessment. The third thing is for your county taxes. On your taxes, there are school taxes and county taxes. If you live in a city, of course, you also get a separate municipal tax bill, Wilmington tax bill, Newark tax bill, Middletown tax bill. With respect to your county taxes, state law says when we reassess, we can increase county revenues 15%, basically have a 15% tax increase on everyone. We've said we're not doing that. We're doing this in a revenue neutral way, which means the amount of revenue that county government receives is going to be basically the same from year to year. So we're not using it to increase our coffers. It's not what I like to say a hidden tax increase. Now, keep in mind, school districts in that same provision of state law, actually in the same sentence, can increase revenue for the school district up to 10% without referendum. They can increase it up to 10% without referendum. Again, sort of a hidden tax increase without referendum. It's up to your individual school board whether they elect to take that additional 10% or not. In the county, it will be revenue neutral. So people say, so my taxes are not going up? Well, they still might go up. They also might go down. The idea of a reassessment is not to raise revenue or increase the amount of money a government gets or a school district gets. The idea is to balance who pays what. So right now, your assessed value is based on the value of your home in 1983. Maybe the value of your home in 1983 was $70,000, and the value of my home in 1983 was also $70,000. Well, you fast forward, about 40 years, and you find the value of your home today is $300,000, and the value of my home is $400,000, right? So my taxes will go up, and your taxes actually may go down. So the county government, in the end, is going to receive the same amount of money, but some people's are going to go up, some people are going to go down. It really depends on how much your assessed value has increased over the past 40 years.
At what point do you think people will have a better idea of how much more they're going to have
So
to
the
pay?
process, probably about a year and a half before they know. We just completed an RFP process. We're negotiating now to hire a national leading contractor to conduct the reassessment. It's going to involve a lot of technology. It's going to involve building new computer systems in the county so that we can assess property on an ongoing basis. It's also going to involve quite a few home visits, visiting homes to assess property. We expect we'll have what I believe they call provisional assessed value for nearly all properties in the county, commercial and residential, by about the end of 2022 or early 2023.
So will people actually be appraisers or whoever, people from this RFP, be actually coming into our homes, looking around?
They cannot go into your home without
Okay.
your permission, but yes, they will be going to neighborhoods and looking around and making judgments to use for the assessment. I should add that we're fortunate to have a county councilman who actually participated in the last reassessment as an assessor, just like I participated years ago as a census taker, and that's Councilman Cartier. So he's well aware of the front lines of reassessment, going door to door and making sure everything, every porch and level on the house is accounted for.
Are you at all worried that some people may not be able to afford their homes after this?
I am not. This is why. Professor Ed Ratledge of the University of Delaware estimates that somewhere in the neighborhood of 80% of residents will either see a decrease in the property taxes, their property taxes will remain, or in their their property taxes, their overall property taxes, revenue neutral, will either go down, it will remain the same, or it will go up slightly. So it's a small percentage of people who will see large increases, and as I've said, insofar as the law permits us, I'm very open to looking at each of those cases. If there's hardship, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that the individual can stay in their home.
Okay. Well, that is all of the questions that I have for this evening, and a quick check of at least our Facebook page here. Doesn't look like we've got too many additional questions. One here, we do have a comment, if you will, I guess, from Jennifer. Police athletic centers, bring them back in multiples. The Ys and seniors and family centers, it seems, by locations are diminishing, if you will.
The more community centers.
Yeah,
I
they
think.
want
I'm wondering
more of
what
that.
location she's in, because some have more than others. We agree. We recognize that adults need things to do, but especially kids are out there and have not been able to go outside and be kids, or they've been able to go outside, they haven't been able to go inside and be kids for much of the last year. We're talking about that. We, in fact, as I mentioned, are having our largest summer youth employment program in county history this summer. Part of that is, I know you remember, Amy, we launched something called 1,000 Kids Coding a couple years ago with Code Differently. We had about 20 young students of color who had the opportunity to learn really high-level computer programming skills in a compressed summer course. They were doing work for small businesses in Newcastle County. We're expanding that this summer to more than 100 young people who are going to be learning software development skills. That's just one of many things that we're doing, as I mentioned, more than doubling the community intervention teams to make sure that there are those community places. And I agree, it's really important that the police athletic leagues, the Boys and Girls Clubs, the Ys are all supported, making sure that in these challenging times they can make it through.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for the discussion, and I'll throw it back to you for some closing remarks.
Great, thank you. Just two quick things. The first is, as I mentioned, earlier today, Sheku Bayu said something that I thought was really prophetic, that we've been through a really dark time. We're now in a dim time, but we see it getting brighter. Please, the fastest way we can get out of this as a community is if you go and get vaccinated, if you take the masking and social distancing seriously. We're all eager to get into this new, I think, exciting post-COVID world. But we need everyone to step up, just as so many of you had the past year. If you've already gotten vaccinated, make sure to talk to friends and family. Everyone over 16, I believe, is now eligible, and vaccine appointments are widely available. One last thing. Several weeks ago at the National Association of County Meetings, President Biden, former County Councilman Biden of Claymont, spoke to the National Association of Counties meeting, and he talked about his time as a county councilman, a Newcastle county councilman, and about how what he learned then was that everybody pays attention to local government, to national government. They pay attention to what the president's doing. Some pay attention to what the governor's doing and what's going on in Dover in state government. But people's real trust or lack of trust in government, and studies show this, is whether local government delivers. So I really appreciate you doing this tonight, Amy. I really appreciate everyone listening. It's our job to make sure we're responsive to you. You are the boss. As I mentioned, go to newcastlede.gov/reimagine. Let's use this unique point in time, this historic opportunity with tremendous resources to reimagine what Newcastle County can be. Thank you.
All right.